Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to SCAG's Toolbox Tuesday session on integrating and institutionalizing equity. This is the final session of a three-part series centered around the Equity Resource Guide. And today's topic focus area is on youth empowerment programs. My name is Anita Au. I am a planning supervisor at SCAG, leading the Performance Assessment Monitoring and Strategy Business Unit, which includes the Environmental Justice Program. I will be facilitating today's session with my colleague, Annalie Ekman. We are very excited to let you all know that we have a very full agenda today, and we plan to definitely start right away so that the presenters can have as much time as possible to share their work with us. So if you haven't done so already, please introduce yourselves by typing your name, pronouns, and organization into the chat. Again, we are using the chat to capture questions that you might have. So we just want to make sure that this feature is working for you. So let's quick thing on some meeting logistics. This meeting is anticipated to take about an hour and a half, and all participant lines will be muted. If you have a question during the presentation, please type it into the chat. This meeting is recorded, and the presentations and session recording will be posted on the SCAG website and sent to everyone who registered for this event. So before we get into our session content, I'd like to offer a land acknowledgement. We are currently on occupied and unceded land of Indigenous peoples who are and have been the traditional caretakers of the land in this region. I am calling from the Chumash, Tongva, and Kizh land. If you haven't already, I highly encourage you to visit the resources shared in the chat to learn more about the traditional inhabitants of the land you live and work on. So on to the agenda. As I mentioned, we have a very full agenda. We're very excited to feature presentations from several professionals within the academic and public policy spaces working on youth engagement. We will introduce our speakers before each of their presentations, then facilitate a discussion to reflect on the presentations and provide a space for everyone to share their insights and experiences working with youth engagement. So a little bit of quick framing on SCAG's equity efforts. So in July of 2020, SCAG's Regional Council adopted a resolution affirming its action to advance justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion throughout Southern California. We had a special committee on equity and social justice, which guided the development of a working definition of racial equity and a racial equity early action plan. So the action plan includes 4 goals and 3 strategies to advance racial equity through SCAG's policies, practices, and activities. So one of the strategies is integrate and institutionalize, and is aimed at internal and external systems change. So that is where we're at for this third and final series for our Equity Toolbox Tuesday sessions. And we have already held quite a few Toolbox Tuesday sessions that align with integrate and institutionalized theming, including ones that are focused on developing equity tools, equity action plans, and planning for rural communities. So you can access previous Toolbox Tuesday sessions through the link in the chat, as well as the link in the slide here, which you will get after the session. Also want to remind everyone and highlight that the Equity Resource Guide does include a section on integrate and institutionalize, and this features local, state, and national examples of equity audits, inventories, frameworks, action plans, trainings, and tools. So that's a lot of information there. Again, we have this information in the chat for you. So SCAG also, we have done some youth empowerment ourselves. SCAG's Go Human program has and continues to support several projects around transportation safety and active transportation. The projects listed in this slide here are just a selection of the projects that involve youth in the identification of issues and solutions. You can definitely find more detail about each of these projects in the mini grant final report and previous working group meetings. But today you'll be hearing a little bit more about the East LA Moves project that two of our guest speakers, Mike and Shirley, have worked on. All right, on to our session objectives. So for today's objectives, we are hoping for the participants to have a greater understanding of what youth empowerment programs are and how they are planned and structured, what the benefits of hosting a youth empowerment program are, and why young people are particularly important in decision-making processes, and what potential challenges are in executing youth empowerment programs and what you can do to prepare to face those challenges. So before we kick off the session, bear with us. We have a few more poll questions to see who's here today and to get you thinking about your experiences with youth engagement as we go through the presentations together. So there are 2 poll questions that should pop up on your screen now. And they are, what type of organization are you representing today? Again, that's just seeing who's in the room. And then the second question is, in what capacity have you ever been involved in youth engagement, empowerment programs? And this is a multiple choice question, so you can answer as, if they all apply, then go ahead and click that. But you can answer as many as you can want. Still rolling in, about 75% participants answering. Let's see, give it a few more seconds. Right, looks like it's slowing down a bit, so I'm gonna end the poll and let's share the results. So looks like we have a pretty good representation throughout all categories except for state agency, which is fine. And then for question number 2, also fairly good representation of the different levels of involvement, maybe a little bit less on the I have had the opportunity to plan or participate, but haven't yet to do so. So that's good, because let's hope to get that number up a little bit. All right. So on to our presentations. Sorry, this was a wrong slide, but I'd like to introduce Dr. Alana Lewis, who is the Associate Dean of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion at the USC Sol Price School of Public Policy. Her award-winning work and teaching centers on cultural competency and health equity. She's going to share her experiences and insights on youth engagement within the LA context. So thank you so much, Lavana. The floor is yours.
So I'm hoping that you can hear me okay.
Yes.
And I want to start by saying that this is for me an honor. And I want to start by saying I'm taking things upstream a bit. My PhD is in political science and I have a master's in public health. So I can't have this conversation without thinking about the context that we're operating in right now and some of the issues that are currently up for conversation. And so I think what's critical for me and what I want to kind of do my best at today is really talking about the importance of the communication that we use in terms of engagement, and also to kind of think about, again, when we're inviting young people out to participate, are we clear in terms of what we're asking them to do? And so this is my kind of outline for this afternoon, just kind of three main buckets. We want to talk about foundations because, again, I think it's important as an academic to make sure that I kind of introduce kind of key concepts for the work that we're trying to do. To talk about the difference between price-led and price-supported activities. Again, I'm at the Saul Price School of Public Policy, and I want to make it clear that there are some things that we can control or initiate as an academic institution, and then there are those things that are totally in alignment with our mission and kind of our goals that we want to make sure that we support and actively promote. And so again, attention given to all of those areas before I'm done with my presentation. And so the first foundational thing I want to introduce is just basically a definition. I teach a social justice class, and I think what's really important for us to understand is that when we're talking about youth engagement, we have to deal with the elephant in the room. And the elephant in the room is the fact that oftentimes young people aren't being heard because adults are making the assumption that they know best what's needed. And so this idea of adultism, the behaviors and attitudes, again, based on the assumption that adults are not only better than young people, but again, entitled to act on them without their agreement. And I just want to talk a little bit about some of the consequences and kind of think about if we're asking people to get engaged in some of the work that we're trying to do, are we mindful of the messages that we're sending with those invitations? And to recognize, again, it may be the first time some young person has been asked to share their opinions, their ideas. And so dealing with all of these factors that may be showing up when young people are coming into the room, the confidence, the issues of powerlessness, not being taken seriously, a whole host of things that can happen, negative cascade if we're not careful, if we're not mindful of the fact that, again, just inviting young people to participate, while it may be necessary, it's not sufficient for them to feel like they are welcome in that space. And so again, I want to, when the objectives talks about what are some of the goals or some of the barriers, understanding again, do people feel like that their voices are going to be heard in the space is going to be critical to that. This next kind of slide is really just talking about the spectrum, and it's focusing in on organizations, but it's making a broader point for me. It's acknowledging the fact that, again, with the invitation to participate or to engage, we may be asking very different things, right? We may just be asking people to just come in as clients. We know what's best, and we're just asking you to just kind of show up. It may be youth participation where we're asking folks to, again, share their opinion every now and then, to involvement where we're asking for more regular input. Are we actually letting young people drive the work, run the work, and lead the work? So I want us to kind of think about, as we're looking at some of these various strategies for youth engagement, are we mindful of the fact that there's more than one, not just point of entry, but also, again, this idea in terms of how fully do we allow people to participate? Again, are we asking people to rubber stamp the work? Are we, again, seeking their engagement at a fundamentally different level, knowing that, again, we get the type of transformation or creative thinking that may lead to different types of outcomes. I'm sure that everyone has seen at least one version of this slide. I think it's important just to recenter people in our kind of equity conversations and to help people to understand that there's a difference between equality and equity. And particularly in the moment that we're in, as I said earlier, recognizing that before the end of the week, we may have as a country decided that it's all about sameness, that we're going to try to have race neutral, race blind policies in circumstances which are clearly not that. And so to get people to appreciate the fact that equity is about what's fair. What are we doing to make sure that everyone has what they need to fully engage? We cannot have equality if we don't first ensure equity, because again, so long as we're trying to give people the same thing, things in very different situations and circumstances, again, we may not have the types of gains that we're seeking, and intentionally or unintentionally, we will continue to leave some people behind in the work that we're trying to do. So I want to talk a little bit more about some of the price-led programs, again, to kind of think about what we're doing as a university, as an anchor institution, again, trying to, again, amplify youth voices in everything that we do. And I start with kind of pathway programs. I know that everybody talks about them, but I use it because I want people to understand that some of the fields that we're interested in, whether it's planning or public policy, those are discovery areas. And so we've got to find ways to get young people connected as soon as possible. And so you're going to hear about pathway programs. We've got several here done by faculty, staff, and students. But again, acknowledging people that if they're going to be in the room, again, how do we provide strategies that not only get them in the room, but to kind of give them a sense of the opportunities that exist because of being in the room. The consultative projects, again, are those types of things that come to us as an academic institution through multiple ways, acknowledging the fact that we are a professional school and we're trying to get young people either here as students or as, again, visitors, to really be engaged in kind of concrete projects that talk about how do you deal with real world problems in ways that are, for us, intergenerational. Again, if we're talking about youth engagement, we're talking about the fact that we're trying to create consistent processes where young people and other adults can kind of connect in ways that, again, allow the wisdom of maybe some of the older adults to connect with the energy and the innovation of young people. And those projects and also the community engaged research allow us a chance to do that. Again, taking ideas and problems that people are dealing with, some of our community partners, some elected officials, some public agencies, recognizing that there are more problems on any given day than there may be people to actually be involved in those problems. And the reason why I think it's important to center on the youth, and the reason why I started with adultism, is I want us to understand that we're often asking young people to be silent until there's this magic age of 18. And all of a sudden they're being asked to make decisions that they may not have been prepared to make. And so what are we doing to, again, help students understand consequential thinking, both in their personal lives, but for me, understanding consequential thinking as it relates to policy. All policies has both intended and unintended consequences, and we need to be able to provide examples and opportunities for students to hone those skills. And the last bucket is the stakeholder engagement, recognizing that, again, if we're going to stay relevant with any of the work that we do, we've got to make sure that we are consistently reaching out to the various stakeholders, again, our community partners, our alumni, and others who, again, are making sure that the things that we're doing in the classroom, the things that we're doing in terms of outreach and other types of efforts are clearly in alignment with, again, where we need to go looking forward, and again, not spending all of our time looking back or in other ways supporting the status quo. And now I want to talk a little specifically about the things in terms of the price support. I'm just going to give two examples, again, within the last couple of years, and I will pass my time, the baton on to the next speaker. And so I wanted to start with the President Biden's equity agenda, because, again, we know that with the new administration, again, I'm political science, so we know that a new administration changes the rules of the game. The idea, again, is we move from friends of Trump to friends of Biden in terms of what will be priorities. And with the equity agenda, President Biden very quickly came in and through executive orders, turned over some of the initial policies that were done by the previous administration. But for what that meant as an institution in terms of supporting it, there were multiple opportunities for people to get involved in making comments. And so I organized comments on the part of my students, whether we were talking about the personal management agenda, we were talking about equity plans for given federal agencies, giving students an opportunity not just to think about what was important to them, but actually submit those ideas to elected officials and others, federal agencies who are looking for ideas. And so I say that's price supported because we want young people to understand where are the leverage points already. So they're not necessarily being charged to create them, but understand things are going on already that they may connect to. If they know that they're available, and again, if they're invited to participate. I keep coming back to this issue of invitation because it's very difficult for some young people to see themselves in spaces that they've never been invited into before. And if they're silent, then we've got to find ways to, again, help them to create their voice. And so that speaks to the LA Regional Youth Summit and the Civic Leadership Academy that was done here at Price earlier this year. Both the County of Los Angeles, the City of Los Angeles, and the City of Long Beach all have kind of youth advisory boards of various sorts. And there's the different genesis. I mean, they're all within the last couple of years. But what's most important about the particular summit is that we made a conscious decision with all the various players to basically say, you know, it should be easier for the next group of young people to do this work. And so the idea of the summit was to have a learning community where instead of having to start over, people could share their ideas, young people, and again, doing what we could to give them information. Again, it was really about information gathering and sharing, but a learning community that was convened, moderated, led by youth. And again, it took some work in the sense of, again, just acknowledging as adults our tendency to want to lead and to really give young people the stage. And so these are I just want to go through some of the feedback of the summit. This is majority of this work is coming from Castillo Consulting Partners. Again, alumni of a couple of our degree programs, again, who's done a lot in terms of youth engagement, and so was asked to create the curriculum for LA County. And so just want to share some of the initial results. Again, not all of the participants completed the survey, again, Likert scale questions, and also several questions that were kind of open-ended. And so these are just some of the results. And again, my last few slides really talk about the results. And so the event objectives were clearly defined. I understood why we were coming together. So the majority of folks either strongly agreed or agreed. It was clear that the event was youth-led and youth-driven. Again, an overwhelming majority, 75%, felt that that was true. Again, the young people were responsible for setting up all of the workshops, designing the agenda, because again, they have access to elected officials who want them to make recommendations. And so again, this was a way for everybody to kind of come together and see some of the things that they were talking about, or that one another would talk about in different geographic locations. And so as you can see, participation and interaction were encouraged. Again, the majority of participants strongly agree with that. The topics discussed were things that I care about. Again, the idea was, instead of assuming that we knew what young people wanted to talk about, how they wanted to talk about different policy priorities, how they wanted to, again, set the tone, so to speak, we let them vote, again, on terms of what they wanted to hear. And our responsibility as adults was to make sure that we had someone in the room with research and technical expertise, had done some research in the topic. So it became another way to kind of engage the young people in a conversation about things that they were interested in. And again, either strongly agree about the issues I care about, and I felt empowered to share my ideas with my peers. All too often, again, we know what we know, but youth engagement is about finding out what they know. And that's not going to happen by accident. It's going to happen by design. It's going to happen intentionally. It's going to happen by us being willing as adults to be navigators as opposed to drivers. And so this is, again, part of what we were talking about. As you can see, the different areas that we focused on, again, policing was, as you can see, students self-selected into given kind of workshop areas, but policing, education, equity, housing, homelessness, transportation were all of the areas that were discussed. And again, as you can see, general support for the workshops, again, as interesting, helped shape my understanding, and again, better equipped to make recommendations, because again, ultimately, young people are being asked to make recommendations to the elected officials, various agencies. again, to elevate their ideas about policies, their experiences with some of these kind of policy domains in ways that, again, may be far removed from people who may be kind of more established, more senior in the work. And so, again, trying to make sure that we were authentic in terms of the voices that we were being lifted up. And again, to make sure that, as I said earlier, that it was an authentic learning community and people felt that their ideas were being heard, and that, again, there was empowerment of young people, not just an invitation to come into the room and be silent. And my last slide, again, I would just want to kind of close with this. I mean, it's like we have to ask ourselves some questions about the areas that we're comfortable in terms of letting people lead. Because, again, we have to recognize that they're looking to us in terms of, again, where some of the boundaries are. And the sooner we establish those boundaries or give some guidance on those boundaries, I think it's important. I mean, it's going to be difficult to invite people back a second time if we don't deliver on the first invitation. And that is my time. And so I'm going to stop sharing and pass the baton.
Thank you so much, Lavana. I think you make really good points, especially with inviting youth to the table and having them lead. That's definitely very something to think about. Fantastic presentation. We have more. Thank you so much, Lavana. Our next presenter, I would like to welcome Mike Blockstein and Shirley Rivera from Public Works. Mike is a co-principal at Public Matters, as well as a public artist and educator. He has led educational and leadership development efforts centered around health, arts, and transportation in Los Angeles, and specifically at East Los Angeles Renaissance Academy for 13 years. Shirley is a creative civic engagement associate at Public Matters, as well as an educator and community advocate. She's an alumna of the Renaissance Academy, where she's continued to bring people together for arts, urban planning, and community engagement projects. So today, Mike and Shirley will share their experience centered around the project-based work that Public Matters works on and their partnerships with communities and public agencies.
Great. Thank you so much for that introduction. We are so excited to be here and speak on the work that we've been doing at Public Matters at the East Los Angeles Renaissance Academy and our partnership with Public Works and other agencies. And so we really wanted to talk about who we are first. And so Public Matters is a creative studio for civic engagement. We really believe that we are helping and bridging the trust gap between communities and institutions, especially in communities where there has been such a deep distrust with institutions as they have been continuously either let down or their voices haven't been amplified. And so we're working in communities throughout Los Angeles, including East Los Angeles. We've done work in Temple City. I'm sorry, I'm thinking of the title of our project, Temple Street in historic Filipino town, and other cities like South LA. And so one of the current projects that we're working on is the East Los Angeles Active Transportation Education and Encouragement Project with Public Works. And so we have renamed the project to East LA Moves, El Este Se Mueve, and it really focuses in East LA. And our goal really is to build a culture of support for active transportation in East LA, which isn't typically how Public Works works. Usually infrastructure is placed into communities without being asked. And so this is really their first drive in trying to make sure that community is being engaged and doing education, because in East LA and in other communities similar to it, conditions have not allowed for you to simply place a bike lane. People will not use it in that way. So Public Works has been working to with our partnership to really build a culture of support for that first, and then building the infrastructure. So advocating for the infrastructure so that people use it prior to the infrastructure being there. And this project is part of the project that I'm going to be speaking about is part of a much larger project. And these are all the different components as a part of that as well. There's a lot of things going on, a lot of moving parts. I won't spend too much time working on that, but the portion that we'll be speaking about is really, we're hoping that we are teaching and training young active transportation advocates and leaders in East LA through this project, and really rooting our work in the people, practices, and places of East LA, and connecting what's already happening and the culture that already exists in East LA to active transportation and opportunities that are already happening, connecting our project goal to what's happening in East Los Angeles. And so, but really the heart and soul of our work is our work with youth. And so our hope is with teaching and training young, active transportation advocates and leaders. And so we've rooted our work a lot in East Los Angeles Renaissance Academy. We started this is a 2-year project. And so we've been working with one classroom at a time. And that's also involved having paid summer internships and really ensuring that Renaissance students are central to everything that we're doing, including the marketing, the messaging, and all the events that we've been able to do throughout our work in East LA for this project. And our work with Renaissance really started back in 2010. I was actually a student at that time through a project called Proyecto Mercado Fresco, which our partnership with Renaissance actually was able to start thanks to USC Price and to the work that Dr. Lavana Lewis was able to do. And so we're grateful that we get to continue the partnership in East LA through the Renaissance Academy. So I'm going to pass it on to Mike for the next portion of our presentation. Oh, Mike, you have to unmute.
That would help if I unmuted myself. Okay, thank you, Shirley, and thank you also, Lavana. I felt like a little bit like one of those bobblehead dolls as you were talking, because I kept nodding my head about everything that you were saying, particularly just starting with the idea of adultism, because I think for anybody that's worked with teens, you would learn very quickly. I always say that teens are kind of like truth tellers. You know very quickly if you're connecting with a teenager, either because they don't hide anything from you, right? Their expressions, their reactions, their eye rolls, their smiles, they're just as they are. But I think, you know, so Renaissance is actually a school that has a focus on urban planning and policy, but it's also a Los Angeles Unified Public High School. So it's not like, first off, that the teachers have any experience or knowledge in terms of what urban planning is. And when we work with high school students, I wasn't really surprised in the poll that Lavana showed that transportation was the least attended of the workshops, because I can tell you, like, if we walk into a classroom and say, hey guys, we're gonna work on a project about active transportation, they're not exactly jumping up and down in their seats with excitement, right? The idea really is, and urban planning is such a big and broad concept, so we need to connect it directly to the lived experiences of the students. So we talk about transportation from an equity perspective. We talk about it as opportunity. You know, if the bus is late, you're late to school, but if also that bus is what you need to rely on to get your aunt to the doctor, you're going to miss the appointment, right? You know, and we make it very clear to the students that they're actually working on projects, and this is the benefit of partnering with Public Works and the county, that actually are, okay, here we go. they're actually, it's not about just a classroom project. It's about doing learning that connects out into the community. So the students know very early on that they're actually working on something that's going to impact themselves, their families, their broader community. For most of them, this is the first time they've ever done anything like that, right? And it's game changing. To know that you're actually being given that agency, that opportunity, where just kind of, as again, Lavana was saying, like, this is about letting the young people's voice, their insights, their creativity take a leadership place. It's also an opportunity to share, for them to share what they know with folks who are tasked with making the big decisions, right? So this is a student talking to the Deputy Director of Transportation for Public Works, for example, right? And you can tell he's the student, right? He's the one taking in the knowledge. The Renaissance student is the one who's sharing the wisdom, right? In this case, it's about a particular project that they're working on, but really the goal is that Public Works doesn't have access to teams. They don't have access to folks who just are never going to show up for a community meeting or a community hearing. So we set up those relationships, and we set them up both in the classroom, but we bring the students to Public Works, we bring them out. They have opportunities to work in public. These are some examples of projects that the students have worked on. So as I say, they're actually working and contributing to real projects that Public Works is doing. So City Terrace Drive is known as a collision concentration corridor, or just let's just call it an unsafe street in East LA. The county and Public Works are actually working on, like, well, how do we make that street safer? That was a student's project last year. They brought ideas, creativity, insight in turn, and then brought that to the engineers at Public Works. This year, we worked with two classes. The juniors were working on a project. Unfortunately, Renaissance and Torres High School, which is the overall high school that they're part of, like many schools, the streets around the school are unsafe. Pick up and drop off is chaos, to the point where sadly this year 2 students were hit by a car. That's not uncommon. I hate to say that, but what perhaps is uncommon is that because the 710 is not being extended, there's funding in East LA to do something about it. So the juniors were working on a project about how do we make the streets around our school safer. Public Works is taking that information, and that feeds directly into, like, their efforts to, like, work with those 710 funds, you know. And then the seniors worked on 2 projects this year. One is proposing new bus shelters for East LA. And the second is around a broader question about how do we increase teens' use of public transit. Again, these are not projects that are just done as class activities where you're learning something and you do the exam, you get through it, and then, okay, that was nice, that was fun, maybe that's it. In the case of the seniors, actually, thanks to our partnership with Supervisor Solis's office, as well as with Public Works and Metro, the students were competing for $10,000 in scholarship funds for college. And it was competition, right? So it brought out all their competitive juices of, like, hey, our team's gonna win, and what do we gotta do, right? And they took the project to levels that we never expected, actually. They presented to a panel of very high-powered folks from Metro, from Public Works, transportation advocates who, you know, were kind of the panel on the one hand, but really, again, they were people who were soaking in what the students had to share about, like, okay, how do we make a better bus shelter? How do we, you know, East LA, it's hot, right? Many lines do not have bus shelters. And so this is something that they experience, the students do daily. as do their family members. So that's what guides all their work. Shirley, I'm going to bounce it back to you.
Yeah, so currently we're working with 10 students from all of Torres High School from different academies. They are being paid to learn and build a culture of support for active transportation in East Los Angeles. And it's been really a joy to work with them. This is our second cohort. We worked with one last summer, and who some of those students were part of our class the previous fall. And so this year we're again working with juniors and seniors, 10 of them again getting paid. And so it's really incredible to see them take this on as their own and becoming those advocates. This is a picture of the City Terrace Art Walk last summer with one of our interns talking to LA County Supervisor Ila Solis. And so they were flawless in talking about the project, talking about what's going on in their community. We're even inspiring Ila in some of the projects that she had not heard about or like wanted to learn more about. And so it was really incredible for these students to share their local knowledge with people who have position in power. And so everything that they're learning, they're developing, and it's they get to bring that back to the community. And like I was saying earlier, I myself was able to be a part of a project or an internship similar to this. And it was really important for me to know that my knowledge was worthy of being heard. It was important to know that despite my age and my circumstances or whatever my background was, my voice was important and that others needed to hear about it because I was a part of the community. And so the same thing for these youth now, it's tapping into their knowledge, investing in them and reiterating the importance of their voices. They are a part of these communities. They see the community in a different lens than the adults do. And so continually investing in them and making a long-lasting impact with them, because it really is playing the long game. When you get them to have starting these conversations young, and them really getting the language or getting the terms at a young age, they will continue to be involved in their community. All 10 of our interns last year are going to college. 4 out of those 10 will be going to UCs. Being a part of a program like this really helps their admission process. Similar for me, that process for myself really influenced the work that I get to do now. I mean, I'm back in my community. I get to be back working with youth and mentoring them and helping guide them through the process of even being a first generation student or the first in your family to graduate, or how does urban planning work in our community and why is it important for them to be heard? Because I got to be heard and I got to be invested in. And so it's really important to continue to invest in these youth because I mean, I can be a prime example of how that investment pays off. 10 years, actually 13 years later, I get to be here speaking to y'all about working with youth, and especially in communities that are disenfranchised and honestly not invested in. This is just a small investment that we get to do for the long run. I know that I may not be around in 40 years when a metro line opens, but I get to work with those who will be. And it's incredible that when we really invest and when we really honestly love up on these students of like, you have the power and the knowledge. Let me just help you get there. So.
Thank you so much, Shirley and Mike, for your presentation. Thank you, Shirley, for sharing your journey with us. And I think that's such a great way of putting it, like plant the seed and let it grow, right? It's fantastic. I don't have any words. That was great. Thank you so much. And for everyone else, if you have any questions about the presentations, just a friendly reminder, put in the chat, and we're gonna open up the Q&A after all the presentations. But these Lavana, Mike, Shirley, you guys have provided so much information already, so that's just let's keep going. Our next presenters are from UCR Center for Social Innovation. So please welcome Fatima Nelson, a community engagement specialist, and Eric Calderon, who is the assistant director at the Center for Social Innovation. Fatima has over 20 years of community engagement experience, serving a diverse population through the Philadelphia Education Fund, the Center for Social Organization of Schools at Johns Hopkins University, and the Long Beach Unified School District. Eric also has extensive community engagement experience with a focus on public policy, working on projects like the Inland California Rising Summits, State of the Inland Empire Report, and SoCal Policy Forum, and outreach efforts for the 2020 census. Eric is an alumnus from UCR. So, and they will be providing us with information and their experiences employing their youth engagement strategies, including their work in planning and facilitating the 2023 Southern California Youth Futures Summit. So take it away, Fatima and Eric.
Hey everyone, pleasure to be here, and thank you so much for the folks at SCAG for hosting these sessions, and we're just really happy to be here in a community with you all. I'll quickly go through a little bit about our center before I pivot to Fatima, and we can both tag team talking a little bit about the youth summits that we've hosted here, and also maybe share a little briefly about the incoming work that we have. In terms of what our center is, we're a public policy research center based out of UC Riverside School of Public Policy, and we're really here to catalyze systems change. And we have these core values in resilience, inclusion, sustainability, and equity. And it's a framework that we've developed called RISE. And really what we want to do is truly realize the full potential of our region, specifically inland Southern California, Riverside, San Bernardino, and even Imperial counties, and inland California, throughout the entire Golden State. And this is in a variety of different sectors, initiatives, including the civic activities, philanthropic investments, nonprofit sector. One thing that we always talk about is if we ask people to pin a bunch of dots on a map of California, and you think about, and we ask you, where do you find innovation in California? We always tend to kind of really look to the coast when it comes to innovation. And maybe that's not the same narrative or belief that some folks might have, including people from within the region and beyond. They might not necessarily see this as a place that welcomes innovation and then really harnesses the talent of our community. So our center was really established to try to shift that narrative and make sure that all of California is a good place to invest and a good place where innovation occurs. Another operating framework that we've really incorporated to all of our reports, research, engagement that we do is something called DNA. And we ask people, what is your DNA? Not on the molecular level, but really just asking people, what is the data that you're utilizing, whether that's insights that are internal or external. And we do tons of research, surveys, focus groups, interviews, mapping. And it's really important to pull data, especially when you're talking to policymakers and other leaders. And once you have the data, how can you supplement the data with the actual real world voices of those that are going out and doing the boots on the ground work? So making sure that we incorporate stories, their voices, the messaging, the frameworks. And once we have these two pieces together, how can we then develop a strong action? How can we ask for specific resources or civic engagement or funding? So just some context. And we do tons of research and data. We partner with tons of community partners. What we're really trying to be is an asset and tool for our partners, specifically our community-based organizations, so that they can better understand their community. also so that they can fundraise better and we can uplift the voices. And especially when we're talking about our bi-county region, especially down if you include Imperial, it's a really, really large community, and we really just try our best to uplift the voices and the work that's happening. Some of our popular reports included the State of the Inland Empire report series, and we do tons of events and community convenings, including tons of events every year, a lot of different participants from across the region. And really, we just try to infill data and research, uplift partners and initiatives, celebrate milestones and accomplishments, and call to action. But one thing that we've always felt is that there's not enough youth voices across the table. And we are seeing through some of the research that we've done and just looking through other statistics, and we see that there is an increased turnout and an increased interest in terms of young people wanting to be part of the conversation, wanting their voices to be heard. And, you know, of course, in these past elections, we've seen an increased turnout, especially in our region, but just all across the state, we are seeing more and more young people turn out to vote. So that's really the challenge that we feel, is that, especially out here in the Inland Empire, is that folks are graduating from these big higher educational institutions, such as UC Riverside, such as Cal State San Bernardino, such as the private colleges that we out here and the 10 community colleges that we have in our region. But we have heard from many, many young people and students that are graduating feeling like they can't necessarily stay, or they can't necessarily call this home, or really see this as a place that they can call home for the long run. Many people feel like they need to take off to LA or the Bay or the East Coast to really find a promising and fulfilling career. And really our center and our work is really trying to hone in those voices and making sure that they can share to us what they think they would like in their communities to make it more attractive, and really just to retain the amount of talent that we are producing every single year. And there's just an increased need for student voices regarding the region's future, especially in the Inland Empire, when we see tons and tons of development occurring every single year, and especially when you see the development boom in the last 10 to 20 years. And in one way in which that we have tried to attempt to get more and more young people involved is through these youth future summits. And we hosted a big summit back in March with over 300 high schoolers and college students that came out to our campus, and they were involved with a ton of different workshops. We had 3 big local leaders come out and present in front of them, which was very inspiring, and was very much the first time a lot of these young folks were able to kind of interface and hear directly from one of their legislative officials. And I'll kick it over to Fatima to share more in terms of maybe about the summit, along with what are some of the best practices that we had when we were going through this summit.
Oh, thank you so much, Eric. I'm so happy to be here to talk about this critical issue. I just wanted to reemphasize that framework that Eric referenced. That's, kind of our center's operating frame, which is that DNA again, data. We were looking at that data. He showed you some of that civic engagement data that we had seen. Narrative work in our center, it really involves a lot of listening, being a really great listening partner. So when we're, partnering with various CBOs and the IE, asking the question, and again, like our previous 2 presenters saying, don't ever come in assuming that you know what people want or need. We really wanted to, or we value lived experience experts. So we, did the intentional work of, what it is, what do you think is keeping young people in the IE from engaging in these broad conversations that we are involved in on a regular basis? And so, that's where it kind of led us to the action side. And that is that summit, that Youth Future Summit that Eric was talking about. And I want to be completely transparent. We kind of started on this journey because the next panelist that you're going to see, they reached out to us, Dr. Veronica Terriquez, and her amazing graduate students through the California Freedom Summer program, and that we partnered with them on an initial summit, and it ended up being a smaller summit where we kind of started the conversation and bringing young people from local high schools in to talk about policy. We had so much fun doing it. We decided, you know what, let's do this again. And we're going to pull in even more partners, more lived experience experts who are doing direct service with young people, and put a program together we think that could be really powerful, especially since, you know, Eric and I are tasked with being a part of a lot of these tables, these inclusive economic conversations and ones around environmental policy and climate. So many policy discussions. And then when we constantly ask them, well, have you had a chance to connect with anybody in the K-12 space in any way, shape, or form to inform these huge strategic plans that are going to be happening and impacting the young people over the next couple of decades? The answer was almost always a resounding no, and we're not always sure how to engage them. So that's really why, you know, we wanted to provide some platform, and that's what this Youth Future Summit was, highlighting the word futures, in that what we had been doing with various CBOs is visioning work. So we were talking to folks about, or doing vision exercises, and we'll share a bit of some specific examples on how we did that, and getting them to imagine how they would like the IE to look 20 to 30 years from now. We wanted to do the same thing with these young people in this summit. But what was key for us is that when we pulled our planning partners together, we didn't want to come in with a set agenda. Because we knew they were the experts. And so centering the community in your planning from the very beginning, instead of coming to them with something that with the framework already kind of pre-made, really helped to, I think, help them to understand that we are advocates, true advocates, and that we're not tokenizing their input. So we centered them in the planning. They were part of the planning process. You heard those, you know, the same kind of best practices from the previous two presenters. The other thing is I've worked with young people for many years, and what I've learned through those, you know, through all of those experiences is that sometimes they're not always clear on what they don't know. You know, our previous presenters talked about the transportation sector and how that might not be the sexiest sector, but they found a way to ground what that sector is and how, you know, and make it real for young people, how it might impact their lives on a day-to-day basis. And so we wanted to make sure that this summit gave us an opportunity to do that. And so we created you know, or we had 12 sectors that we wanted to expose young people to, from housing to transportation to public safety and racial justice. And again, connect what they may see in their everyday lives to these kind of broad policy phrases and language that they may not be as familiar with. We as adults deal in it all the time, every day, but not them. So we wanted to kind of give them the language that adults use to kind of, you know, sometimes it's used as like a barrier for young people to participate, you know, a way to almost intimidate when we're trying to engage them. We wanted to make sure that we're sharing the different language, the phrases that are being passed around from politicians and policy experts all the time, so that they could be more comfortable in participating in some of these conversations in the future. Don't just build the house and hope they come. So I have seen some really phenomenal programs go unattended by young people, because a bit of, like Dr. Blair talked about in the beginning, that adultism, you know, we think this is what they need, and we're going to put an amazing program together with all these experiences and a really great flyer and send it out there, and then just hope that they all just sign up and realize what a great opportunity we're providing for them. Well, a lot of opportunities go by the wayside when you operate in that model. So what we were trying to do in engaging our partners and saying, you know, we want to do some of the work for you and helping you to understand how the data we're trying to get from young people, what's, you know, particular avenues or stakeholders within the school institutions might be aligned with what we're trying to gather. And I'll give you an example. So we are doing a lot of policy conversations. So we asked the districts, can you connect us with your US history teachers? Can you connect us with your government teachers? Can you, you know, let us know who is handling civic engagement in social studies at the district? We want to talk to the ASB kids. We want to talk to the kids who are running student government. And those are some of the specific groups that we can use as springboards for a broader conversation. But I'm going to do, you know, these folks are often working on the plane in flight, so they don't always have the capacity to know how to do the outreach. So we are going to do some of that prep work for them. These are some of the folks that you can probably tap into that might be good attendees or participants for this particular program that we're putting together. So don't just build the house and hope they come. Give very specific ways, avenues for you know, ways that they can engage the young people in the programs that you're putting together. And then obviously, it just goes back to centering community, making sure that the schools and the youth in those schools, whenever possible, are part of the planning. So next slide, Eric, if you could. So big issues, obviously, is always funding. So what we were we wanted to make sure when we offered this opportunity that we didn't come to our partners and say, you know, we want to put this amazing event together, but it only works if you can contribute this, if you can help us sponsor this part. We wanted to make sure that we were providing a comprehensive opportunity. So that meant we don't start the conversation unless we know we have the funding and the support where they may not have the capacity to make this program happen. So a very concrete example of that is, how are we getting the young people to the summit? It wasn't here's this great event we're putting together. We'd love for you to pay to send us your young people. No, we came to them and said, this is a great event we'd like to put together, and we'd even provide them funding for the transportation. We will feed your young people if you send them to us. It really signaled, I think, to our partners how serious we were about the opportunity. And it also signaled to them that we understood their perspective in that, and we were listening, going back to that qualitative research. And a lot of our conversations, often your school partners will tell you, not only do we not have the capacity, but we don't have the funding to apply to any additional programming. But if you can come with a ready-made package and you're filling those gaps for them, they're much more likely to engage their young people in whatever you're trying to build with them. So again, helping with the logistics and planning whenever possible, providing the capacity where they can't. We made it as easy as possible for our district and community partners to participate. If they couldn't do the outreach themselves, we would offer to fill in those gaps, things like that. Guest speakers are important. You can see we had some really amazing politicians who, once they heard that we had all of this interest in young people and coming to, to talk about their policy ideas for the future, they wanted to be a part of it. But again, centering the community and using that narrative and qualitative research to build the agenda. So often our young people are saying, it would be great if we could have direct opportunity to talk to them about what we want to do instead of just sitting and listening to a speech. So what we did was we tried to build that into the agenda, into the workshops. Later on, an opportunity for the kids to hopefully connect one-on-one with some of these politicians. But the other thing that we did is we asked the guest speakers, instead of you kind of speaking in broad strokes, we want you to talk about what your experience was as a young person and what turned you on to public policy. Was there some, was it a tragic moment? What motivated you to become a public servant when you were a young person? Or maybe there wasn't anything when you were a young person that motivated you. But what turned you on to even start to want to start down the path to political science or public policy? And so Dr. Corey Jackson, who was our newly elected assembly member, the congressman, they came in and they had to kind of retool their usual speeches to fit what we needed for our young people for that event, which was, this is what my personal experience, my personal journey was from when I was in your seat, in your shoes, up until where I am now. So our young people can connect the dots whenever they could.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll just share, I think just with any kind of public event or big event planning, there's a lot of the obstacles of like the logistics of securing an event. I know at UCR, we hosted it here, but there's a big fight for space here. Obviously partnering with schools, each school or district had its own point person, whether it was a student or someone in their district office or someone in the administrative office. And of course, just taking care of the logistics and planning of coordinating with others. We also had a resource fair where students were able to kind of connect up with a lot of the local youth-based organizations, nonprofits, service providers, other folks that provide internships and fellowships. All those folks were here during lunch. So it was also a really great interactive way for folks to be involved, which also, again, takes more time and planning. But once you have that audience there, once you share to your partners that we have a good segment of students that are going to be joining us, right away, people are interested in coming out and tabling and connecting, networking with them. So it's just been an amazing, thrilling ride. And of course, we're excited to continue to do this with other programs. And we do foresee something happening over the summer, along with we'll be doing a road show down in Imperial County in September as well. So we're just going to continue to get this ball rolling, working with partners, securing funding so that we can continue to welcome these students into these spaces and really kind of bring them out of their classrooms and engage with one another. I'm not sure how much time we have left. This was connected to our IE 2030 vision and roadmap process. We could share a little bit more in terms of what the activities were, in terms of how we were kind of probing and welcoming and really just trying to get their ideas out. But can we have a time check really quick?
Yeah, I think we're running a little bit behind though.
Okay, it's fine then. Well, at the end, we'll share a little bit more about our IE 2030 project and how this was connected up. But we really just appreciate the opportunity to share, this one of many events and sessions that we'll be welcoming tons of students onto our campus or a venue and really just having them engage in interactive activities and workshops.
Thank you so much, Eric and Fatima, for sharing your lessons learned and the challenges and how we could possibly overcome them. So that's really a lot of food for thought. Our last presenter is Dr. Veronica Tariquez, who is a professor and director of Chicano Studies Research Center at UCLA. Her research centers on social inequity, social inequality, immigrant incorporation and transitions to adulthood. She asked how institutionalized policies and practices can be responsive to the needs of low-income immigrant, Black, and Indigenous communities. Veronica co-authored a report on emerging youth power in the Inland Empire, which is why we initially reached out, and we're looking forward to learning more about the academic insights into youth engagement in her presentation. Veronica.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for that introduction. I just also want to add that I'm a professor of urban planning at UCLA. in addition to being in the Chicano and Central American Studies Department. And I want to just share that the previous panelists all shared valuable information that resonates with my research. So over the last decade, I've surveyed over 4,000 young people and conducted in-depth interviews with over 500 young people involved in different community change efforts, ranging from immigrant rights to racial justice efforts. Even some young people have been involved in debates around access to transportation, access to healthcare, and so forth. And so one of the things that aligns closely with my research and the other presentations is that the resources need to be there for young people to be engaged. That we have to combat adultism. We have to provide rides and provide food. And with those kind of supports, young people have the potential to learn how to be active leaders in their communities. So next slide, please. So one of the things I want to emphasize as you think about working with young people is that they're coming of age during a time of multiple crises. We have a broken immigration system. And as you know, you all work in Southern California, we have a very large immigrant population, children of immigrants whose parents may not be documented, as well as many undocumented young people. So we have to think about that context when engaging youth. We also have ever increasing economic inequality. Economic inequality is at an extreme level now. And a lot of young people are dealing with things like food insecurity, housing insecurity. The costs of higher education continue to rise, and the promises of higher education are not what they used to be. Going to college does not guarantee that you're going to climb out of poverty. We have a climate crisis. There's racial tensions that young people are confronting at school and in the community. We have political polarization and disinformation. Young people spend a lot of time on social media, and not all the information that they're getting is accurate or good for them. And as you know, we have a mental health crisis that was exacerbated by the pandemic. So we have to keep all of these things in mind when trying to engage young people. Next slide, please. However, we also know that young people are very resilient and have the potential of exercising a voice and political power. And I've seen this across, prior to the pandemic and during the pandemic. And young people have been critical voices in statewide and local government reforms, anything from calling out the need to disaggregate data on Asian American communities to demanding sanctuary and funding for a whole range of immigrant rights and youth services, ensuring that they have access to mental health care, reproductive health, and just, basic things like asking for a bus stop across the street from a popular park or a school. So there's different ways in which young people can get involved. Next slide, please. But I have to emphasize the need for the type of supports young people need to exercise their voice. And I'm going to just tell a brief story about a young man named Brandon who grew up in Boyle Heights, who ended up being a strong leader in the region and now across the state. So he's actually supporting younger folks in becoming involved in different community activities. So when Brandon was in middle school, he got expelled. He was getting in a lot of trouble. There were a lot of boys in his neighborhood who were gang affiliated, and he was in the wrong place at the wrong time at school and did some things that were not good. So he got expelled. Luckily, he switched schools and ended up going to Wilson High School, where a group called Inner City Struggle was organizing young people. And one day after school, Brandon heard there was free pizza, and he showed up for the free pizza. And eventually over time, the other young people in the after school meeting asked Brandon to speak up. They gave him increasing roles. Eventually he learned how to run a meeting. He got more comfortable in public speaking. And before long, he was leading rallies at his school and also mobilizing young people to go to LAUSD meetings. But it took time. It took a couple of years and a lot of meetings for Brandon to find his voice. It took food, it took rides, and it took mentors that look like him. And so across the state of California, and especially in Southern California, LA County, Ventura County, the Inland Empire, Orange County, I've met so many young people like Brandon who develop a very sophisticated political analysis around local issues. Next slide, please. But the first thing that they often need is just developmental supports, food at meetings, rides. Many young people need academic and career counseling. And then since the pandemic, self-care and healing activities have been critical for young people to help address some of the anxiety and stress that they're feeling. So at the most basic level, young people need these kind of supports. However, they are also capable, especially at the high school level, of developing very sophisticated understandings of how government works and how to impact policy. But it takes training and workshops. So some of the training and workshops that some of the other speakers have offered are really critical. And providing these on an ongoing basis can help young people connect the dots. How is hunger? How is the social inequality, housing insecurity, immigration issues, environmental justice issues, all interconnected? And how can they speak up at certain hearings, events? How can they help define the policies that really impact their lives around them? So it takes a bit of guidance and training on how to analyze both the problems and the solutions, but they're quite capable of exercising their voice and being informed participants. So it's not just about protesting when you don't like something, it's about proposing solutions. And young people can be at the table given the proper supports. Now, they also need guidance in developing basic skills, from running meetings to speaking in public, to coordinating events. That doesn't necessarily come naturally to anybody. And so that training needs to exist because many of the schools cannot provide that kind of civic environment because schools are so stretched thin, teachers are so stretched thin, especially as we recover from the pandemic. Schools are understaffed. So the basic skills that young people may have developed either prior to the pandemic or in middle-class communities may not be supported in some of our schools, especially now since educators are so stretched thin. And then young people need to guidance on understanding which government agencies can help implement their solutions that they're proposing. Making sense of what problem is a city problem, what problem is a school district problem, and when can we go to Parks and Rec to kind of propose these solutions. So that training, that civic education, that guidelines, how to speak up at a meeting, how to prepare for a school board meeting, city council meeting, all of that requires intensive guidance. Next slide, please. But it's all possible. And over the past decade, I've documented ways in which young people have made an impact on a wide range of policy arenas, from education, health, housing, criminal justice, environmental justice, LGBTQ rights, women's rights, and so forth. Next slide. And they've worked with a range of agencies, many of the ones that you represent. And what's often helpful is having people like you in these agencies provide a welcoming environment, creating a safe space for young people to speak up and also be themselves, and also allowing them to make mistakes. You know, they're learning about how to exercise their voice in the civic arena. So overall, my research has some important implications for local government agencies. I want to remind you of the potential of young people to become informed voices in local policy debates, but they also need support to do so. And so some of the folks on my co-panelists provide some of that training and support, as do grassroots youth organizing groups that are present across Southern California. And so you have the potential to really partner with some of these organizations, educators, universities to really leverage youth voice and youth power as you engage in your everyday work. So I really appreciate your time, and I also appreciate the folks at SCAG and my fellow co-panelists.
Thank you, Veronica. Thank you so much for your presentation. I love that we kind of wrapped up this session with especially that last slide on like, okay, what now? What can local agencies do? And how can we, support all of the work that and research that you are contributing to this space, as well as like the work that is going on with Public Matters and all of the like summits that are put together. So thank you so much for that presentation. And now we have a time for questions. If anyone has questions for our presenters, things you want to discuss, any like takeaways that are really staying with people, if you'd like to come off and onto camera or put it in the chat, that would be great. Yeah, I love that we have all of these incredibly talented and just like dedicated speakers today. So we want to also just thank you all for being here and sharing your knowledge. I don't see any hands or any chats, but I kind of want to connect some of the thoughts that we heard today, and in terms of we talked about partnerships between, well, I want to point out that we're talking about a lot of partnerships between you all as speakers. We have USC and Renaissance Academy ties, and then ties between the Youth Summit at UCR and Veronica's group. So there's like obvious themes of this is not a one person driving the effort. This is a group effort. So I guess leaving off on Veronica's last note of like how local governments can be involved in this. Do you all have, I guess, like ways that you've successfully integrated local government agencies into your partnerships? Or I'm particularly interested if there's anything that like, any critiques that you have on like, and not like naming names or anything, but like critiques you have on partnerships with local agencies, things you wish they could have done better, or like we could have had more lasting relationships if we had only done something like this. Lavana, go ahead, your hands up.
So I think what's important to acknowledge is that some of the confusion among the partners comes from confusing what people aren't willing to do with what they're not able to do. And so when I talk about boundaries, I mean, we have to understand what each of the individual players can legitimately do, right? I mean, so long as we're unrealistic about our expectations, there's always going to be the grinding. But I think that I'm political science, and I'm not a fan of term limits. But one of the things about term limits in the state of California is that you've got elected officials who are looking for their legacy, right? And so some of this work can become part of that legacy. So it's kind of making those connections between, again, things that are valuable for the electeds and the agencies, and again, reasonable asks, which are within the boundaries which they have to operate. I think it's important to acknowledge that.
Yeah, definitely. Being realistic about our what we can make changes on, and asking us, like the last slide of your set was like, let's ask ourselves those questions so that we're able to like make some change on that. Mike, go ahead.
Yeah, I want to add, like, I think it's also about bringing folks outside of not just their comfort zones, but their kind of traditional ways of doing their business and practice. So, for example, we have folks from county agencies that come in and work directly with the high school students at Renaissance. It's very intimidating for a polished county staff member to come in and have to work with a group of high school students. And we tell the students that. We tell them, hey, guess what? They're afraid of you. People are afraid of teens. And they're like, what? And all of a sudden that like changes everything, because they're like, oh, what? But it's also they're actually working in an educational context together. And that's really, I think, the heart of what we try to do. Is it's about learning, it's about reciprocity, it's about exchange. So it's not like, okay, one person is an expert and the other is not. Everybody is bringing different levels of expertise and knowledge, and it's about the union in between all those.
Yeah, bringing in that, I think Shirley mentioned it, bringing in that like love aspect of into government and relationship spaces of like really loving on the people that we're serving, and like respecting that mutual learning and mutual, like, I guess, benefit in this case. Fatima.
I just wanted to quickly maybe state the obvious, which is whenever you have an opportunity or honor to be in the same space with these young people, I tell them so. I say, it's an honor for me to be in this space with you. And I let them know, you know, Dr. Tariq is such a big part of this. Like when she came to us with her Freedom Summer program, it just really sparked in me a need to continuously remind young people, because I'm a history major, of like the history behind that term, and that we are in the world we are today because there were people who were their age 50, 60 years ago who decided to shift the paradigm. And I say, we can't wait. We're not waiting for you to get to college. I said, we need you right now. And their eyes get so big, like, wow, are you serious? They're like, yes, you are our experts. You are our lived experts, and we need you to take the reins. We didn't do such a good job, is what I tell them. You know, we need a lot of help. The adults in the world need a lot of help from you. We need to know, we need new ideas, fresh ideas, and we can only get it from you. And, you know, just constantly, whenever you can, giving them that confidence that what they have to contribute is just as valuable as the PhD. Then hopefully over time they'll understand just their power.
Yeah, well said, well said. And that made me think of Dr. Lewis's second slide, I think, about like that list of like adultisms and like challenges, but like one of them being the top one, I think, is like confidence, right? Instilling in them that they are the experts, they are, you know, we're listening, and they like, you know, it's their future too. I think I'm also going back to something Shirley said, which is like, yeah, we're not going to be here 40 years when this transportation project finally gets done. Like that needs to be shaped by the people who will be here. And yeah, just making that connection between like the length of transportation projects and like the length of, you know, age is I think a critical takeaway for me. Just as like we're in a transportation agency, SCAG is planning for 2050, like where are youth in our engagement programs? So asking those questions for sure. One more thing, we only have a couple minutes left, but I think we talked about youth in like a really broad aspect or definition, and something Dr. Lewis, you said was like 18 being this magic age. And I think we talked about voting and a little bit about like what that means in the civic engagement space, but like critically that K through 12 group, like, you know, how are we engaging those that, you know, demographic and how are their voices, the K through 12 voices, being invited into these spaces and meaningfully, and not like the flyer, sending the flyer out to like their elementary school, but like, you know, what does that look like? And how are we fundamentally changing our public engagement methods to include and invite and focus on that K through 12 demographic. I don't know if anyone has any responses to that, but just putting it out there that we talked about like a little bit of shift of like what is youth considered in this program. So yeah, if not, Eric,
Oh, I can share really quick.
Yeah.
I'll share. I know with Fatima and I, we really, again, just reaching out to the both county office of educations, then working our way down to the districts, and then from districts finding the people, whether that's admin or the teachers, and then being invited to do be a guest speaker in these classrooms, being invited to their events. So really, I think it's about letting the schools know that we are a service, we are a resource for them, and offering ourselves to them and making connections with, you know, those allies, those teachers that are willing to offer that space. And furthermore, really just there's a lot of youth programming, a lot of community-based organizations and others that do that groundwork, that have fellowships, that have programs, summer camps for kids and for young folks. So I think it's really about, you know, finding those spaces, finding those leaders, and really connecting up with them, and trying to offer your availability, your resources to them as much as possible, and finding unique ways to connect.
Thanks, Eric. Shirley, really quick.
Yeah, really quickly, I think prior to my time at Public Matters, I was also at the Caden Children's Museum, and we used to do programming on urban planning to 3 to 4 year olds. And that was really exciting to think about building blocks and building communities, and how that can start at a really young age. But also, like, again, it's it's a long-term process and playing the long game. We have a student that was an intern last summer with us. And for one reason or another, she's a very high achieving student, couldn't be in the classroom with us during this past school semester, no matter how much we pleaded. But throughout the school year, even though she wasn't in the program with us, she would continue to reach out, or we would, as we were walking in the hallway, I'd be like, hey, how are you doing? How's college applications? She's a junior, so she can't apply, but already thinking that through with her, because that is a continual investment in them. And now she's in Washington, DC, with the, I can't remember the exact name, Hispanic Caucus. And so she's there for the summer, but again, the continual long progression, long game with them of just continual investment with them. And even though we didn't have the funding to continue working with her during, actually, no, she didn't, she had other things going on. And she's doing amazing things this summer. We invited her to be a part of our community, our CAC for another project that we're in. Again, reiterating, like, your voice is important and you're a part of the community, and we want to hear your voice. And so in her being a part of our community advisory committee, emphasizing again the importance of her as a youth having a space to build community, or build her community. And so
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. Yeah, making sure youth leaders are at the table in those advisory committees is huge thing. We are over time, but thank you all of the speakers today, walking away encouraged and inspired by your work. I'm hoping that all of the attendees on this call also are paying attention and understanding of the work that's been done and it is going to be done. I'm looking forward to that Imperial Summit that Eric and Fatima are hosting. And yeah, I think we're gonna wrap up. We have sorry, this is a logistics thing, but we have one slide if you want to put that up, Jennifer. It's a quick 2-minute survey for our Toolbox Tuesdays if you want to help us give us feedback on this session and maybe ideas for future sessions, more things you want to learn about and hear what's going on in the region. We're happy to continue this learning journey with all of you. Yeah, and this is the final session of our Equity Resource Guide series, but we're looking forward to hosting future equity-focused Toolbox Tuesday sessions in the future. And yes, thank you to Jennifer Martinez and all the SCAG staff who helped support this session today. And thank you all again for being here and hope that you stay safe and healthy and have a great day, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.